While the previous tutorials go over how to add planar thickness to a three-dimensional model for axonometric drawing, through three-dimensional modeling means you can also technically do this via just a drawing from scratch. So what I would recommend here is probably taking a basic screenshot of your basic make 2D of your model, of your massing model, to get the base information into the file. You can also just do it from a plan that you have. So if you're looking at something like a rectangular plan, I'm just going to do this really simply. A lot of the content that we're looking here is going to overlap with the first two tutorials. So if you're going to generate this drawing directly from scratch, I would recommend looking at the first two Rhino tutorials and just watching them and getting a feel for the process, because we're not going to go over all of the same content here that we did in previous tutorials. So I'm going to just draw a little rectangle here. So I'm going to just do it at, let's call it 30, we'll do a 30 by 10 for now. So the first step to any axonometric is going to be to take your plan and rotate it. So you can obviously rotate it either direction, but you're going to make sure that you rotate it 45 degrees. So if we're looking at this, let's say that we now have 10-foot tall walls, so we can just add 10 feet. And then we're going to add that everywhere. And then we can just go ahead and copy this up as the roof portion. So this would register our basic axonometric. And obviously these, if we exploded this, these would all be hidden lines. So technically we can add a layer here called hidden, and we can go ahead and change the layer of those. So that would be looking at something like that. So this would be the basic sort of object that you're working with. So now what we need to do is we need to actually add a certain thickness to this model. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. One way that I really like to use is if I actually draw a circle here, and I draw that at 1 foot. And I'm not sure if I hit this one exactly. So if you draw at 1 foot, what this is going to allow you to do is basically take from there to our intersections, and this would allow us to draw a full profile of a frame here. And then if we do some quick measurements, we're going to measure the thickness of this, and we see that it is indeed 1 foot. So you see that that's how we would go ahead and create that plane there. Now, if I wanted to do the same thing for the other side, since they're parallel here, I could either do the same process and I could draw the circles here, and I could draw that profile, or I could copy and paste basically this external profile over to that side. Or we can look at a means of polar drawing. So if we look at our polar tracking here, we can actually change it to be at 45-degree increments. And what that's going to allow us to do is then it will automatically snap to a 45-degree plane. So if we come back in this direction, we can type 1 foot or just 1. Then our tracking will automatically put us in that direction. And then actually we can just come down, and we can come over, and we can come up, and we'll actually have, we need to get rid of that first little piece that we drew, but we'll actually have that. So polar drafting is really helpful for something like what we're doing here. So polar, again, down, if you go down here, click that on, and then if you hit the little down arrow, you can change it. Instead of 90, 180, we'll change it to 45, 90. Then we can go in and we can actually fill these pieces in. So if we go down here and we go vertical, we're going to go down 1 foot, then we'll go over. We're going to go all the way to our end here. Again, we're going to come over, and you see that I have all of the snaps on, so it's making this really easy to do. Again, we need to get rid of this little piece here. So you see that we now have a plane at the top there, and then we would do the same thing here, and we would do the same thing to actually finish out our little end caps. So this can be done. Just keep in mind that this is going to get a little bit confusing as you go through the process. So what I would recommend doing is, if you're going to do it like this, draw a sort of profile out. So I'm going to delete some of the information that we have in here. So if I'm looking just at these two planes, what I would suggest you do is, once you have these done, I would go ahead and draw a profile on the outside portion of this. And then I would just move these out of the way. And again, because you have your polar tracking on, it will work to drag those off at a 45. And then you can sort of complete these out. So you can draw all of the curves that you need to have here. And your piece would end up looking like that. And then you can do the same thing for that. And then if you need reference points to bring back in here, you can always drag this line back in there to figure out how small your panel is going to be in there. But this can be done. It's obviously a little bit more of a complicated process than what you'd be doing in Rhino, mostly just because of the visualization. But you can do it. It is a really clean way of doing it, actually, if you draw the panels and then move them back out. But if you have any kind of angles or anything like that, I probably wouldn't recommend starting with this route. I would probably start with the Rhino route and then you can always bring those pieces into AutoCAD later to do a lot of your organization and things like that. With the polar tracking addition is a really nice thing to do. And I find the drawing to be a little bit easier in the AutoCAD environment. So take a look at this versus the other Rhino tutorials. Again, I would suggest watching the other 2 Rhino tutorials just so that you get a feel for what this process actually looks like, and then go from there with your thickness modeling.